Welcome to my channel. It's called Lunasa. In this channel, we do a deep dive into the writings of Florence Scovel Shinn. For this video, I wanted to talk about Florence's take on Genesis in the Bible and just how important it is to her writings. Now, I've noticed this for a while. She makes little references to Genesis that she doesn't openly quote, but they are there if you know what to look for. And I don't know if you know this, but there are at least two creation stories in Genesis. So let me take you through them. The first one is in Genesis 1, and then the second one is in Genesis 2 to about Genesis 5. So one story has God creating the heavens and the earth, and then he decides to create humans. He makes them, and then he says, "Be fruitful and multiply." You've heard of that, right? And that's it. But the second creation story happens the next chapter, where God creates the earth, and then he creates Adam and he creates Eve. Then there is a prohibition: do not eat from that fruit, from that tree. Then the snake comes, and then they eat from the fruit. They eat the fruit from the tree, and then God curses them and banishes them from Eden. A lot of people conflate the two, but that's one thing you should learn not to do with the Bible. If you want a tip from me and some of the great scholars of the Bible, do not conflate them. I think it was N.T. Wright who pointed this out to me in one of his books, that if book 1 says one thing, book 2 says another, and book 3 says something else, keep them all separate. Don't create this overall meta story that combines all three, because that means that you're focusing on a story that neither book actually talks about. I've seen this done with the nativity stories in the New Testament. A lot of people conflate them. I don't know if it'll surprise you, but 2 of the Gospels don't have a nativity story. They just start with Jesus grown. Actually, one does that. The second one has him starting from the concept of a word, John. And then the other 2 have nativity stories, but they're not the same at all. They're very different. And a lot of people will just combine all the nativity stories so that there's the wise men, and then Mary, and then Joseph, and everything, and going off to Egypt and everything all in one big story. It's like, no, you're looking at 2 different stories too, and they're all saying something different. Keep them separate. Don't create this overall gigantic meta story that none of them say. And that's the same thing with Genesis. There are two, two creation stories in the first 5 chapters of Genesis. Keep them separate. Keep them separate. It'll help you out a lot. Oh, and for fun, I was trying to read, I think this is a very sacred part of the Bible, so I was trying to read it in the original language because I was so tired of translations. I've read 30 plus translations of the Bible. I'm like, give me the real language and let me have a go at it. And so I was spending some time learning how to read Genesis 1 in Hebrew, which is really fun. So I can say Genesis 1:1 in Hebrew. It goes like, Bereshit bara Elohim. Bereshit means in beginnings. Bara means to create from nothing, and Elohim means God. So Bereshit bara Elohim. I think the full one says, Bereshit bara Elohim v'hashamayim v'ha'aretz. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So I've been studying Genesis 1 to 5, and it's fascinating. So let's go back to Florence. Florence makes this distinction. What we experience is Genesis 2 to 5 in our life continued. We have the Adam, we have the disobedience, we have the the like Adam not just violated the commandment of God, but he brought in death, destruction, sickness, poverty, that kind of mindset into our lives. And a lot of people actually think that Genesis 2 goes to Genesis. Okay, Genesis 2 is when Eden is created. It's a very dry place. There's waters on the ground bubbling up, and there are trees and lots of rivers. So and then man is created, Adam is created out of the dirt. So it's Genesis 2, and then the next, my Bible's right here, and then we also get Eve, Genesis 2. Yeah, at the end of Genesis 2, we get Eve. And then Genesis 3, we get the tempter, the serpent tempting Eve, and the apple thing. It's not even an apple, it's a fruit. They don't say what it is, but we've conventionally called it an apple. And then humans get banished. Let me read it. Humans get banished out of Eden in 3. Yeah. And then 4, this is my Bible. So, and then 4, the children of Adam and Eve are created, Cain and Abel. But we won't talk about them, because what really matters in terms of genealogy, for real, is Seth. It's so weird, but that's a whole different story. So it says, when Adam was 30 years old, his son Seth was born, and Seth was the very image of his father. And after the birth of Seth, Adam lived another 800 years and had other sons and daughters, and he died at the age of 930. And when Seth was 105, his son Enosh was born. And when Enosh was 90, his son Canaan was born. And when Canaan was 70, his son Mahalalel something was born. You read it and tell me how you would pronounce that. And when that son was 65, his son Jared was born. And when Jared was 160, his son Enosh was born. And then Enosh had this and that and that, and then the genealogy continues and continues and continues and continues. And then we go into the fathers and the grandfathers and the fathers of King David, the fathers and the sons that lead to Joseph and that lead to Mary, and then, well, Mary doesn't really have a genealogy, but that lead to Joseph, go on, and that's why we get the genealogies in the book of, I think it's the book of Matthew, has some genealogy to start to see who leads to Jesus, the genealogy. So all I'm trying to say with that is we have found ourselves believing that the story of Adam and that huge disaster just led to this world that we have. We're the descendants of the descendants of the descendants of the descendants, and we feel like that is the story that continues. And so we feel like we are facing the curse and the betrayal and the disaster that Adam and Eve brought into humanity. It is such an important story. And when you feel like you are facing the fallout of the story to this day, then that becomes significant. I actually looked throughout the rest of the Old Testament, and no one else seems to make a reference to Adam and Eve and what Eve did. But it becomes really significant in the New Testament because Paul is saying that Jesus comes to be the new Adam and to redeem what happened. So there's this real big pressure to redeem, to fix, to kind of fix what happened in Eden with Adam and Eve and all of that, to take away that curse and to bring us into a better place, and to really feel like we are descended from that story and we are feeling the fallout and ramifications of that story to this day, and that's what we're experiencing. So Florence says that our carnal mind actually comes from the story, comes from Adam. She ignores Eve. She like our carnal mind to Florence is where we find death and destruction and poverty and lack and limitations of every kind. It comes the from Adam and this part and this creation story. So I'll take my book for Scovel Shinn. It's backwards. Sorry about that. And in the book, The Power of the Spoken Word, Florence writes, the Adamic dream is the illusion of opposites. Adam fell into a deep sleep, having eaten of the tree of illusion. Of course, Adam stands for generic man, the race man. The race man vainly imagined loss, lack, failure, sin, sickness, death. The awakened man knows only the one power, God. So let's go back to Genesis and we'll see where that actually comes in. I will point out Adam didn't do anything. It was God, but like hear me out on this. Let me find that section. Okay. Bring my Bible over here. If you're curious, this is the New Living Translation from 2002. So, Yahweh, it's not God. I'll point this out later in detail, but Yahweh curses Adam and he says, because you listened to your wife and ate the fruit I told you not to eat, I have placed a curse on the ground. All your life you will struggle to scratch a living from it. It will grow thorns and thistles for you, though you will eat of its grains. All your life you will sweat to produce food until your dying day. Then you'll return to the ground from which you came. For you were made of dust, and the dust will return. So from that moment, that kind of struggle and lack and limitation was brought into humanity. And the way Genesis is structured with the rest of Genesis 2 to 5 is structured with the rest of Genesis. The story just continues. And then the way the whole Bible is structured, that story just keeps continuing. So this lack, limitation, struggle, it just keeps continuing. And then for Eve, Adam, Yahweh says, to the serpent and to Eve, Yahweh says, because you have done this, you'll be punished. You'll be singled out from all the domestic and wild animals of the earth. You will grovel in the dirt so long as you live. And from now on, you and women will be enemies. Your offspring and her offspring will be enemies. And to the woman he said, you will bear children in intense pain and suffering, and you will just desire, have a lot of conflict with your husband. So from this moment, the whole idea of animosity and battle and opposition comes into our world. From this moment, we start to feel that we need to have intense pain and struggle to bring anything into life, anything into our lives. It doesn't come easily. Now, because of this moment, because of what Yahweh says to Eve, he has now introduced pain and suffering into our world, and animosity and conflict and battle and struggle and lack and limitation. That is where we get those things to this day. They're still with us. And that's what Florence is talking about. So the Adamic mind, that whole world of Adam and Eve and the serpent and Yahweh, it's coming from Genesis 2 and 3. 2 and 3. And as I've been trying to put out there, that story to us just keeps continuing. We're living the fallout, we're living the ramifications, we're seeing it to this very day. The problem, though, Florence vehemently disagrees. It's like, what happened to Genesis 1, people? What happened to Genesis 1? It's very important. So let's read Genesis 1, which is a whole different creation story. And to Florence, we need to realize that this is the story that matters. This is the story that continues. Genesis 2, 3, 4, 5 is over. It's over. It's a story. And we need to realize it's Genesis 1 that has continued to this day. So let me read Genesis 1 and what happens. So, Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Let the waters beneath the sky be gathered in one place to form dry ground. So it happened. Let the bright lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night. They'll mark the seasons, the days, and the years. Let the sun rule the day and the moon rule the night, and on. And I actually find this so interesting. So interesting. And then on the last day, God said, well, not the last, near the end, after earth has been created, God said, and it's the Elohim. So I should point out, okay, the only word that is translated into as God is Elohim. And Elohim only exists in Genesis 1. I'll put it out there. When you start to get into Genesis 2 and 3 and 4, what you will find is that you now experience the Lord God. And it will translate to Yahweh Elohim. So Elohim is the only word for God. So Yahweh is translated as Lord. So Genesis 1, you get a pure Elohim, only Elohim. And then Genesis 2, 3, 4, you start to get Yahweh Elohim as a concept to itself, which I think is a tad bit different. I don't know about you. And then by the end of Genesis 5, at the end of Genesis 4, it says, people now call upon the Lord, and the concept of Elohim is gone. If you start to pay attention to that, it's fascinating. Like, where does the Bible say, especially in the Old Testament, God? And when does it say Lord God? And when does it say just Lord? So Genesis 1 is purely Elohim, purely God. And the whole drama of what went down with Adam and Eve has to do with Yahweh Elohim, the Lord God, and as a separate thing. Just, yeah, I promised I'd talk about that. So there you go. So Elohim has created the heavens and the earth. Everything's ready. And then God said, let us make people in our image to be like ourselves. They will be masters over all life, the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the livestock, and wild animals and small animals. So God created people in his own image. He patterned them after himself, male and female, he created them. God, the Elohim, blessed them and told them, multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. You have dominion over it. Be masters over the fish, the bird, and all the animals. I think it's the King James Version that translates it as dominion, and this translates it as subdue it, bring it under your control. And what's very special about Genesis 1 and this creation story is that God looks over everything he has made every single day and says, What do you think he says? He says it's good. So the third day, God had finished creating the dry ground and all the plants and all the seeds and all the trees and all the flowers and all that good stuff. And God looked over it and saw that it was good. And all this happened on the third day. On the fourth day, God created all the lights, the lights to rule the day, the lights to rule the sky in the night. He looked over it all and saw that it was good. See where we're going with this? This is good. This is good. And when we were created as humans, God looked over all that He made, looked at us, and said, it's good. God looked over all He had made, and He saw that it was excellent in every way. It was excellent in every way. And so the creation of the heaven and the earth and everything in them was completed. On the seventh day, having finished his task, God rested from all of his work, and God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because it was the day where he rested from his work of creation. So we are good. This is about goodness. This is about excellence. God sees this as good. God sees this as holy. God sees this as excellent. And we are here in the image and likeness of God, just like God. And we are here to subdue, to have dominion, to have power, to have control. That is what we're here for, according to Genesis 1. And Florence would like to point out, this is the story that continues. We're living this story. We're living this story. We continue to be made in the image and likeness of God. We continue to be like God. We continue to live in a good world, a beautiful world, an excellent world. God sees it as beautiful, as excellent, as lovely, as wonderful. That this is holy and sacred, and this is the world that has continued. This is the story that we are living in, and you got to switch your mind. Instead of feeling like we are the continuation of Eden and Adam and Eve and Yahweh Elohim and that whole drama and trying to figure something out there, we are fulfilling, we are descended from Genesis 1. So, where does Florence talk about it? Well, she talks about it in so many of her books. In The Game of Life and How to Play It, in the chapter, I think it's The Power of the Spoken Word, Florence writes, in the 23rd Psalm we read, He restores our soul. This means that our subconscious mind or soul must be restored with the right ideas in the mythical marriage, which is the marriage of the soul and the spirit. For when the subconscious mind is flooded with perfect ideas of the superconscious, God and man are one. I and the Father are one. That is, He is one with the realm of perfect ideas. Hang on with me. So He is man made in God's likeness and image. So I'll say it again. We are men made in the likeness of God and in His image, and we are given power and dominion over all created things, our mind, body, and affairs. So when we're truly connected with the superconscious mind, God and man are one, and we go back to Genesis 1, where we are made in the image and likeness of God, and we have power and dominion over all created things, and our body, our mind, and affairs. And in the chapter, The Law of Forgiveness, Florence writes, God sees man as perfect, created in His own image, and given power and dominion. This is the perfect idea of man, registered in divine mind, awaiting man's recognition. For man can only be what he sees himself to be, and can only attain what he sees himself attaining. And in the book, The Power of the Spoken Word, Florence writes, God's gift to man is power, power and dominion over all created things, his mind, his body, and his affairs. So you can see that Florence is nodding to Genesis 1. And she makes it very clear that our issue is that we get stuck on Genesis 2, 3, and 4 and feel like we're living that out. And with that comes fear, loss, lack, struggle, animosity, battle, uh, pain, like feeling like you'll survive, I guess, but you have to bring it out with every fiber of your being, and life's just hard. And she wants us to think, no, 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 we're Genesis 1 people. We are Genesis 1. That is the real creation story. That is how we really got here. And that story lives on to this day. And in that story, it is good, it is excellent, it is beautiful, and it is fabulous. And we are here to have power and dominion. We are here made in the image and likeness of God. We are here to take after God. We are here to resemble God. We're here to think like God, act like God, because we are made in his image to be just like him. So let me say it again. We are here. Like in Genesis 1, we're told we are made in the image of God and we are made to be like God. We're patterned after God. And so it makes a whole lot of sense that we're at our best when we start to think like God, when we start to work in the God mind and the superconscious mind, and we start to think like God, because now we're acting in our true nature of why we were created and how we were created. And when we recognize our power, we go back to Genesis and remember that we were given the power to subdue, given the power to have dominion, given the power to have control, given that power and dominion. And that is key to Florence's philosophy. And it goes straight back to Genesis 1. So I hope that this deep dive was useful for you. It is, yeah, the distinction between Genesis 1 and then Genesis 2, 3, 4, and 5 are just fascinating, just fascinating. And just remember that they are two different creation stories, and really think about which one do you think we're living out? Which one do you think is followed, is continued, and which one? Because if you do Genesis 2, 3, 4, 5, it's a whole different experience than Genesis 1. And time again, I read Florence's books and I see her tip her cap into Genesis 1. I see her nod to Genesis 1. I see her reference Genesis 1 and realize that that story is where it's all at. We were made in the image and likeness of God, to have dominion, to subdue, to have power, and to have control. And life is good. Life is excellent. And it is truly something special. So, in my channel, I just do a deep dive into the writings of Florence Scovel Shinn. If you like that, subscribe to my channel because I just keep doing more videos just like this. And yeah, if Florence Scovel Shinn was a metaphysical writer who lived 100 years ago, and her ideas are legendary, her ideas are so helpful to this day. If you are new to Florence, I will introduce you to her ideas. If you have read Florence before, I will introduce you to new ideas and remind you of some of your favorites as well. Florence is all I talk about on this channel. So again, if you love this kind of stuff, please subscribe to the channel. And if you like this video, if this was quite a long deep dive, almost 30 minutes. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, let me know. And if you have a question for me, if you want to give me feedback, if you want to say something to me, then leave a comment. I do see them and I will reply, so leave me a comment. And as I say to end every single video, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.